Hey everybody. So my Screencastify limit here, I think I'm going to be limited to only 5-minute videos, so I might have to break this down into two of them. And maybe I'll have to talk a little bit more quickly than I normally do. But anyway, today I'm going to review the quiz that you took last week. I'm going to take a look at lesson 10, and a reminder that the final unit test of the year covering the Civil War will be not tomorrow, will be Tuesday, on the 2nd. As far as assignments, Wednesday it'll just be to make sure the test is done. Thursday, maybe I'll have a little something for you. But as far as real assignments go, things that will be put into Power School, the last one will be the unit test on Tuesday. So without further ado, the quiz number one: Andersonville was a camp in Georgia that held Union prisoners of war. I'd say about a third of you got this one wrong. And I understand why. It's because you see Georgia and you think, oh, well, that's in the Confederacy. Right, but if it's in the Confederacy, Georgia is in the South, of course, they're not going to hold Confederate prisoners of war. They're going to hold Union prisoners of war. Jumping over number 6, who delivered the Gettysburg Address? That would, of course, be Abraham Lincoln, the president of the country for the entire duration of the Civil War. Number 2, what captain was in charge and later hanged? That would be B. Henry Wirz. We can have arguments about how much he was actually responsible for, considering the lack of resources that all of the South had, not just prisoners of war camps and the overcrowding because the prisoner exchange system left, but he was in charge of that ghastly scene. Had about 8 to 10 people say Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee actually died of natural causes in 1870, so he didn't live for much longer after the Civil War, but he lived as a college president, so not exactly living in squalor. Number 7, a spike in prices and depletion of resources. That would be the Richmond bread riot. So the Confederate capital in Virginia led to that was there. Jefferson Davis. That was covered in lesson 6 from a couple weeks ago. Number 3, the massacre of Fort Pillow played a role in the prisoner exchange program ending. About 300 African-American soldiers attempted to surrender, but many of them were massacred. They were killed even as they were trying to surrender. So even though it has a funny name, Fort Pillow, Pillow Fort, ha ha ha, is actually not good. Named after a guy named Gideon Pillow, actually. Number 8, which man led the South? That would be Robert E. Lee. That really highlights one of the differences between the Union and the Confederacy with regard to their armies around Washington, D.C. Robert E. Lee led what was called the Army of Northern Virginia successfully, again, for the entire duration of the war, whereas Ulysses S. Grant was the leader of the Army of the Potomac, but only for the last year. Before that, they had a guy named McDowell. They had George McClellan, who I'll talk about later. They had Burnside, the sideburn guy. They had General Meade. They had General Hooker. It was and nobody really did a great job against Robert E. Lee until Ulysses S. Grant was given the post by Abraham Lincoln. Number 4, Gettysburg is in Pennsylvania, right? That was part of the Confederate invasion of the North, trying to end the war right then and there in 1863. Number 9, the loss at Gettysburg was coupled with the defeat of Vicksburg. So Vicksburg was the final Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi River. That fell the very day after Gettysburg, even though they're on different sides of the country. It's what was it in the video that we unfortunately didn't get a chance to watch all of like we normally do. Well, not all of it, but most of it. Vicksburg, because their city fell on the 4th of July, they didn't celebrate 4th of July in Vicksburg for like 87 years, I think, until like the very end of World War II. So even though it's a patriotic holiday for the country, they were very upset with their city's demise, which makes sense. Number 5, heading to the Battle of Gettysburg in the early parts, the Confederacy was very successful. They'd won at Chancellorsville, won at Fredericksburg. Unfortunately, that's right around the time when Stonewall Jackson was killed by friendly fire. But that gave Lee the confidence to go forward. And finally, number 10, everybody got right, which was inflation. So I am just about out of time. So I will see you later with the next thing.